Good morning and welcome to News Center Maine's Political Brew. Glad you could be with us. Joining us this week are former state senator and mayor of Portland Ethan Strimling and former House Republican leader Joe Bruno in the House with us today. Good to see you again.
Good morning. Thank you.
Good to see you. We served back when dinosaurs were roaming.
We won't say how far back that was,
but it's good to
Still
see you.
A few dinosaurs at the State House.
Yeah, that's true. That's for sure.
In the news this week, the Senate failed to advance a bill to codify the right to choose an abortion. Senator Susan Collins says that bill wouldn't allow hospitals to seek religious exemptions from performing abortions, and she voted no. Senator Angus King voted yes, saying no one with religious objections would be compelled to provide that procedure. Joe, what comes next in this whole drama?
Wow. I wish I knew what came next. I mean, the bill was over the top anyway. You know, while we focus on the religious exemptions, it would have allowed abortions right up to 9 months. And I think most Americans find that reprehensible. I mean, it's 50-50 on abortion or not abortion, and to bring it out to 9 months was way over the top. You had Joe Manchin join in, so it wasn't just a Republican thing, it was bipartisan, as the Democrats like to say.
Ethan? Talk about over the top. Nobody's talking about 9-month abortions in this bill, and all it did is make sure that the viability was across the board, across the country. And, you know, Susan Collins, I think, is really making a grave mistake. She's been elected as a pro-choice U.S. senator from the state of Maine because the state of Maine is 60% pro-choice, and she just has made very clear that that's no longer her position, and I think it's really doing damage. We're going to talk about it later, but there's some poll numbers out in which her favorables are plummeting in the state. I think this is one of the issues. You can't say one thing and then do something else.
But you've got Mitch McConnell acknowledging this past week that if in fact Roe is overturned by the Supreme Court, which many expect it will be, perhaps there will be a national ban on abortion, while other Republicans say, no, let's leave it up to the states. So how does this get sorted out, Joe?
I think I don't foresee a national ban on abortions. I think it's going to go back to the states, and every state will determine what they want. And I think that's the proper way to go.
Well, what that will mean, of course, is that half the states, the women in those states, will not be able to control their own bodies, make their own decisions about their own economic future, and when they want to create a family for themselves. So I don't think it's a good idea that the country is half divided. Half of us make it illegal and half have it legal.
Is it going to be a campaign issue in Maine's elections? For example, Paul LePage, who's on record as opposing abortion, will he have to detail in his campaign what restrictions he would try to put in place if Republicans are in control?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's already clear. He attended numerous anti-abortion rallies when he was governor before. He didn't try to propose legislation because he knew it wouldn't go anywhere, but I think there's no question he is firmly in the anti-abortion, anti-woman's right to choose category. And yes, this will be an issue, no doubt about it. I think it's something that's actually going to widen the gap for Governor Mills.
I think we have to wait and see what the Supreme Court decision actually is before we start making it a big campaign issue. Abortion in Maine is going to stick around in Maine because, as Ethan said, 60% of people in Maine are pro-choice. The Democrats want to make an abortion an issue because they have nothing else to run on, and I think we're going to get to that down the road. The economy is in shambles. Republicans are strong for the economy, as always. Abortion's not a big issue in anyone's minds.
Now, Ethan, you mentioned the chalk messages that appeared outside Senator Susan Collins' home in Bangor. She reported the first incident to Bangor police, who determined there was no threat nor any damage, and then they had Public Works clean up the chalk message. At least it's a quiet sort of protest. Was this handled well?
No, it was handled terribly. Just remarkable thin skin. She has a reputation for that, and just a terrible public relations mistake. You know, she should have just read the message, gone into her house and ignored it, and now she's the butt of jokes across the country. And as I said, you know, her favorables are just plummeting because people are just realizing she isn't what she said she was when she was elected.
Well, you don't become a 5-term senator with bad ratings and people don't like you. The fact of the matter is she did what she was told to do by Capitol Police, call local police. Now, it's only chalk, but with the extremism that's happening across this country, you know, I don't like people bothering people at their houses. You want to go to their office and bother an elected official, do it all you want. but people's homes are their sanctuary, and they should be left alone at their homes.
Unfortunately, we do see a lot of that these days. Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, was saying, hey, there's protests outside my house 3 or 4 times a week.
Right.
You have to have thin enough skin to understand. As long as we have a right in this country. The First Amendment says on a public sidewalk, you get freedom of speech. You can go outside somebody's house. I've demonstrated down in Kennebunkport outside Walker's Point when Bush was home, because that's the right of protesters to do it. If you're an elected official and you don't like that, you need another job.
But the president had Secret Service people there, so he wasn't
peaceful.
too worried. Yeah, but you don't know that it's peaceful.
It disrupts people's lives and neighbors.
Exactly.
They didn't necessarily sign up for that either.
Right, you have neighbors. You should leave people alone at their house. In their public workspace, go protest all you want.
Democratic State Senator Chloe Maxman of Noblesboro has been getting national attention for a book and an op-ed in the New York Times in which she argues that Democrats have abandoned rural communities, and that helped Republicans gain control of dozens of state legislatures, leaving Democrats with just slim majorities in Washington. Julia Brown, who was campaign director for Maine Senate Democrats in 2020, says Democrats in Maine understand rural America, and their margins at the State House right now prove it. Ethan, have Democrats stopped trying to persuade people that don't already agree with them?
We wouldn't have the margin that we have. I mean, we have the widest margin in the Senate that either party has had for 50 years. So clearly Democrats know how to speak to rural districts. I think Leader Bruno knows back in his day. The House has been Republican for 2 years in the last 50 years, and those are rural districts across the state. So clearly we know how to talk to rural districts, and if folks want to pretend that there's some issue there, go ahead and do it, but we're going to keep our majorities, I think.
No, I don't agree with this at all. Rural areas, population isn't there. Why the Democrats have such large numbers is the population centers, just Cumberland County alone is 290,000 people. That gives you a lot of seats right there, and most of them are Democrat seats. But once you go past the margins, like Raymond, is a rural area. And we don't want what Portland wants. We want low taxes. We want minimum services. We want to be left to ourselves to provide for ourselves and do what we need to do. We don't want all this government funding. We want a good education system, low taxes, good roads. So they don't speak to me.
Yeah, but yet, Joe, in your district, there's a senator, right? Who is a Democrat, and that's a rural district, right? And that's Troy Jackson. That is a rural district. Ned Claxton. That is a rural district. These are Democrats who are talking to Democratic voters. So
wait a minute.
Why don't Republicans? Why haven't they ever gotten control of the House in 50 years?
Wyndham is no longer a rural district. Then that's there's 20,000 people.
It includes Raymond. It includes all of the areas around there.
Yeah,
so.
But Wyndham influences that district.
Demographics aside, Republicans must be loving this little particular
absolutely.
Democratic fight.
We do. Anytime Democrats fight amongst themselves, we love it. Just like they like it when Republicans fight amongst themselves.
They usually do it much more than we do, so we really like it when they do. So we're a little uncomfortable at the moment. But look, Democrats are talking to rural voters. It's clear based on the margins. We need to keep doing it. Every race in the state of Maine is individual and personal. Anybody who wants to win a district has to talk to who's in their district.
Recent books that have come out have a recurring theme. Insiders in the Trump administration talk about the then president inquiring about some things far outside the norm, if not downright illegal. For example, former Secretary of Defense Mark Esper says Trump proposed a number of what he calls outlandish foreign policy ideas, including a complete troop withdrawal from South Korea. He also suggested firing missiles into Mexico to target drug cartels. And there's a book by New York Times reporters recounting Trump asking why police or troops couldn't start shooting BLM protesters. There are others as well. Was China using a hurricane gun on us? These things coming out. Let's assume some of them are true, at least. Ethan, do revelations like this do anything to damage Donald Trump's chances of becoming the next presidential nominee for the Republican Party?
Unfortunately, the way the Republican Party is operating right now, I don't think they really care. There is, it's at this point, it's become a cult, and no matter what Donald Trump does, people are going to support him. He's done tremendous damage. Before he was elected president the first time, we saw scandal after scandal after scandal, and the Republican Party just didn't care. So I'm glad these revelations are coming out. Certainly, I hope it gives some Republicans, reasonable Republicans, a little bit of pause. But I'm afraid that the Republican Party is lost, and until Donald Trump is no longer their leader, that's going to be the case.
Joe?
Well, talk about scandals. Joe Biden, there's plenty of scandals there also. So which camp are you in? I mean, Donald Trump was the president. He was a Republican, so I voted for him. But, a lot of the stuff he does for moderate Republicans isn't the way we actually think government ought to run. Now, whenever
does it hurt him, do you think, if he wants to run again?
No, there's still enough support for him. There's a fringe out there that would do anything for him. Mm-hmm. And frankly, I don't believe half the books that come out. They need to sell them, so they go on these tours and say these things, and you just go, come on, really?
Sometimes they have the audio recordings to back it up.
Well,
So,
true. But I mean, the New York Times reporting on a Republican, I wouldn't believe anything.
The spring edition of Maine's Critical Insight poll from Digital Research is out. It talked to 662 registered voters responding, half of them by phone, half online. Got a margin of error of plus or minus 3.9%. Not surprisingly, financial concerns are by far top of mind for these voters, but this poll was conducted before the leak of the draft opinion from the Supreme Court on the possible end of Roe v. Wade. Joe, the GOP, I think, is counting on the economy remaining the biggest issue when we get to the fall.
Of course. It's always the strong point for Republicans. We look at what's happening, 8.5% inflation, price of gas, $5 a gallon. I mean, all those things are in favor for the Republicans. I mean, Janet Mills got a ton of money, from the feds. It fueled inflation. Maine isn't any better off for it. She has nothing to fall back on, saying, "Look what I did." There's really nothing there. So the economy is going to be the biggest factor. People are working harder, and it's costing them more to get to work and do what they need to do.
Will the Roe v. Wade question trump the economy?
I don't know if it'll trump the economy, but it will certainly be part of the conversation. And I think I don't disagree. The economy is an important factor, and what Janet Mills has is a lower unemployment rate than what Paul LePage had. She's done a very good job on some of the basic, most important parts about economic growth, clearly the inflation, but I don't think anybody blames Janet Mills for the inflation. People understand corporate greed. People understand some of the international policy that's going on that's creating that. But Janet Mills has a stronger economy than Paul LePage ever had, and this race is going to be about going backwards or going forwards. And I think that's where he can't dispute the fact that her unemployment number is well below where he left it.
That's because there's less people working. Many people retired during the pandemic, so if you shrink your workforce, you have less people who are on unemployment.
Well, let's take a look at the numbers in the Mills-LePage race. It's a statistical dead heat with Janet Mills at 42%, Paul LePage at 39%, 13% undecided. However, if Maine's congressional districts were two separate states, Janet Mills would be governor of CD1 and Paul LePage would be governor of CD2, Ethan.
Yeah, and this is what happened last time when she won. Remember, she won very strongly in the southern part of the state. She kept her margin tight in the north. I think that's what she has to do again this time. Places down Cumberland County, York County, very strongly in support of the governor. But thankfully, we don't have a governor of the north and the south. We have a governor of one Maine. You need to get a majority of those. I think it's going to be much harder for Paul LePage. You see, his margin in the second CD is not as good as Janet's in the first CD, and that means that she's getting more Mainers to support her than the other way around.
Yeah, statistically, though, it's such a small, it's within the margin of error both ways. Janet Mills won Cumberland County by 50,000 votes last time in 2018. That's what made her governor there.
But one statewide with a majority, which hadn't been done, over 50%, hadn't been done in decades for a first-term governor.
Paul LePage didn't do it.
Right. So, I think as we look at this race, though, as we go into the fall, we're heading into a recession more than likely. And as we get to that recession level, people are going to vote pocketbook.
Yeah, but you think they vote for governor based on, we were in a recession while Paul LePage was governor as well. He didn't get punished for that because people understood the national politics around that.
We'll see. Congressional races, when we look at those, voters are asked which party they would vote for. They didn't name candidates, but the first district, Democrats 43%, Republicans 26%, undecided 26%. In the second congressional district, almost a mirror image, Republicans 42%, Democrats 24%, 28% undecided. And yet, Democratic Congressman Jared Golden in the second district has a 41% approval rating, just 26% disapproval rating. So, Joe, what do you take away from looking at those numbers where generically in the second district they want a Republican, but as a practical matter right now they approve of what Jared Golden is doing?
Let's not forget, Jared Golden lost to Bruce Poliquin except for ranked choice voting. So now there's not going to be ranked choice voting in this election. So there's a very good chance that Bruce Poliquin retakes that seat. Everybody likes Jared Golden because back home he acts very conservative, yet he votes with Nancy Pelosi 90-something% of the time. So which is it, Jared? Are you a conservative or are you a Nancy Pelosi fan?
Look, I understand Republicans have a little trouble with math, but without ranked choice voting, that means it's head-to-head, which means that Bruce Poliquin, who did not get a majority last time, is not going to get a majority this time. That's what Jared Golden got it. What these numbers tell me, and it's unfortunate that they used a generic because I don't think that that's good. They should have tested, Poliquin against Golden to see what it is. It certainly helps us understand better why Jared has been so in the middle. People like me who are progressive Democrats who get frustrated by his votes, you see that district. It's very tough for a Democrat. He is going to have a tough race this year, but again, what we're asking voters to do is go backwards with Paul LePage and backwards with Bruce Poliquin, and I don't think people want to do that.
And by the way, Joe, you can't rule out there'll be a third-party candidate or an independent candidate in that race because Tiffany Bond has been collecting signatures again.
I'm sure the Democrats are helping her collect signatures because they
but
want ranked choice voting.
The Maine Democrats gathered for their quadrennial convention this weekend in Bangor. Ethan, we'll start with you. What advantages and disadvantages does your party have as we now begin the fall campaign in earnest?
Our biggest advantage is we control all three bodies, right? We control the House, we control the Senate, and we control the Blaine House. And that gives us a very good base. And we control them with very good margins. And that allows us to start from a place of strength, good candidates who are running. It is very important that the rank and file get fired up and get ready for a big turnout in the fall. This is an off-year election, so that's our disadvantage, right? This is going to be a year where Democrats may not be as inspired. There's nothing at the top of the ticket. But hopefully with some of the contrast between the future versus the past, I think in the end that's a good place for Democrats to be.
How do you read where Democrats are right now, Joe?
I think they're in trouble. I mean, the Cook political report even says Maine is probably a toss-up in both bodies, Senate and the House, and the governorship. So, I mean, everything's at play, and I do think it will take a couple of months to come down the road, and people will say to themselves, am I any better off? Was I better off under Paul LePage economically? Yes, I was. I absolutely was. Was I better off under Donald Trump? Yes, I was. Because the economy was booming at the time until the pandemic hit. If that pandemic didn't hit, Trump would still be president.
But Joe, when you and I served in the legislature back when dinosaurs were still roaming in Maine, how many times did the political reports out of D.C. say that the House and the Senate were toss-ups and the governorship was toss-ups, and how many times did it not flip? Every time. And that's important to remember. We're always somewhat of a toss-up.
Maine is a contrary state, too.
Right.
People don't necessarily follow national trends. That's always important to keep in mind. Let's wrap up with our winners and losers in politics this week. Joe, we'll start with you.
I think the winner is Paul LePage. It's showing him in a dead heat with Janet Mills. It's going to be a fun campaign to watch down the road. I think the loser is Joe Biden. This economy is going down the tubes. It's all his fault.
Ethan?
My loser of the week, we talked about it earlier, Susan Collins. Just a terrible mistake, really thin skin. She's getting just hammered nationally, both for her votes on this and for the chalk incident. My winner of the week, I'm going to do a little shout out to the letter carriers of Maine. This guy Herbie who always comes to my partner's deliver her mail, and he's just the nicest guy in the world, so friendly. And I always think letter carriers, they get so much grief, but they do such a good job.
Federal employees.
Yeah, they can be. So I just wanted to give a little shout out to the letter carriers as the winners of the week.
Joe Bruno, Ethan Strimling, thank you. Thank you for being with us. We'll see you next time. News Center Maine is back after this.